Myth number 3. The Bible is a product of man, not of God. One of the ways that we know the Bible is from God is that it is filled with prophecies that accurately foretell the future. The Bible contains hundreds of prophecies, a large fraction of which have already been fulfilled. Those that have been fulfilled have been 100% correct. God tells us in the Bible that these prophecies are there for a reason. God says through the prophet Isaiah, "I am God, there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come." God tells us in advance what He is going to do. This is one of the ways that we know the Bible is from God. The Bible contains hundreds of ancient prophecies that have been fulfilled and are being fulfilled in this present age. The Gospel of Mark records the following exchange between Jesus and His disciples. As He was leaving the temple, one of His disciples said to Him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings." "Do you see all these great buildings?" replied Jesus. "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Jesus prophesied that the temple in Jerusalem would be destroyed just before He was crucified in about AD 33. In AD 70, the Roman general Titus crushed a Jewish revolt, and as a result, the Temple of Jerusalem was burned and destroyed. The Jewish historian Josephus tells us that all of the stones were disassembled to remove the gold that had melted into the cracks between the stones during the fire. Not one stone was left on top of another. Thus, Jesus' prophecy, which seemed highly improbable to the disciples in AD 33, was exactly right. Hundreds of years later, Muslims built the Dome of the Rock in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the site that had been so effectively cleared by the Romans. If you would like to see much more evidence that the Bible is from God, visit our website, www.multimediaapologetics.com, and check out the other videos available there and find out how busted this myth really is. Myth number 4. The New Testament was assembled by the pagan Roman Emperor Constantine in AD 325. The notion that the New Testament was put together by the Emperor Constantine betrays true ignorance of well-documented early church history. It is not as if the writing of church history began in the 4th century. A large body of writings of the followers of the apostles and those who came after them is available to us. These men were personal disciples of the apostles and those who came after them. Their writings amount to thousands of pages which document the history of the church in the first few centuries. So we have excellent records of what the church leaders who came after the disciples believed. All of the books included in the New Testament were quoted by the Apostolic Fathers in the earliest writings of the church, starting at the end of the 1st century and continuing from then on. An early list of the accepted New Testament books was discovered in a library at Milan and is known as the Muratorian Fragment. The Muratorian Fragment has been dated to AD 170. It was damaged and begins in mid-sentence describing the third Gospel as Luke, and omits only Hebrews, James, and 1st and 2nd Peter from the present-day New Testament books. The Old Latin translation of the New Testament dates prior to AD 200 and was the Bible of the Western Church. It contains the same books suggested in the Muratorian Fragment. So by AD 200, 23 of the 27 books of the modern New Testament were undisputed in the Church. Some minor variation of New Testament lists is found over the next 150 years as the Church wrestled with the origin of a few books. The Church wanted to make sure that all books traced back to an apostle. By AD 367, the Church Father Athanasius affirmed all of the 27 books contained in the present-day New Testament as canonical, and this view was affirmed by the synods at Hippo and Carthage in AD 393 and AD 397 respectively. So we can see that the DaVinci Code suggestion that the New Testament was force-fed to the Church in AD 325 is completely wrong and is just another busted myth. Myth number 5. Christianity is based upon the pagan religions of the day. This myth is easy to bust. The things that Christians believe and do are based on the New Testament, which we now know was restricted to the writings of eyewitnesses to the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ and their close associates. Christianity traces its origin to the historical facts and events, unlike the pagan religions of the day, which were based in mythology. What pagans believed was of little consequence to Christians, because they believed that the truth was revealed in the revolutionary teachings of Jesus Christ. Who else but Jesus Christ in the history of the world has said things like this? You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Why would Christianity stoop to inferior pagan teachings when the words of Christ are so far above anything that has been written in the history of the world? Once again, this myth reveals total ignorance of the history of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus Christ. If anyone will take just a few hours to read the New Testament, they will recognize that it is above any pagan or worldly philosophy from the beginning of the world until today. If you can't invest a few hours to read the entire New Testament, read the Gospel of John, or read chapters 5 to 7 of the Gospel of Matthew, and you will see that this myth is totally busted. We mustn't forget our final myth and the most intriguing part of the supposed Christian conspiracy to deceive the world. Myth number 6. Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene. If we read through the New Testament and the writings of the leaders of the church from the 1st century and on, there is not a single mention that Jesus was married or that he was involved in any kind of romantic relationship. Those who seek to promote such ideas turn to the writings of the cult of Gnosticism discussed previously, which was firmly rejected by the early church, and twist them to suit their needs to sell books. Those who were with Jesus and their followers, who were leaders of the church, rejected these ridiculous myths, and so should you. So this myth is busted. As he was nearing his death, the Apostle Paul prophetically tells his disciple Timothy, "For the time will come when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths." And that is exactly what the DaVinci Code's view of Christianity is. Mythology that tells the world what it is longing to hear. Don't worry about those things that Jesus said about righteous living and heaven and hell. But it sells a lot of books and it generates lots of publicity. Those who mislead others should read the Apostle Peter's second letter, where he tells us, "But false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly introduce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves." The New Testament is a reliable book that you can count on to be the words of Jesus Christ. Don't be misled by the DaVinci Code or other mythology. Jesus says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." Find out for yourself what else Jesus had to say in the New Testament, and discover God's loving plan to rescue humanity. Your eternal destiny depends upon it.